My mother made us answer only to our assigned numbers, because children with names develop delusions of significance. I was 4, not fourth born, just the fourth one she kept. She'd trained us to be living digits, chemically compliant and emotionally suppressed, until 11 whispered, "You're not 4, you're something that starts with J." When we finally escaped and found a photo hidden in her study, it showed mother as a child labeled Subject 7 First Trial, 1973. My mother demanded we answer only to our assigned numbers because children with names develop delusions of significance. I was 4, not fourth born, just the fourth one she kept. Mother collected us like variables in her experiment, though she preferred the term acquiring assets. Some came through private arrangements, others through channels that operated in shadows. She'd built her fortune in pharmaceuticals before pivoting to her true passion, proving humans could be optimized like code. Mother was Dr. Patty Walsh, and her estate in the mountains was less home, more laboratory. 30 acres of walls and schedules and rules. At our peak, 17 of us lived by her numerical system. 17 children stripped of identity, molded into functions. Numbers exist to serve equations, she'd recite during morning formation. You are components, nothing more. The expectation was elegant in its cruelty. We were to operate as living digits, executing commands without personality, desire, or complaint. Speak only in response to direct queries. Consume precisely measured nutrients. Sleep in designated numerical slots. React to stimuli within her calculated parameters. Display no recognition of pain, joy, or loss because numbers are incapable of feeling. But 11 was defective. She'd arrived 2 years before me, barely walking, with eyes that refused to dim despite mother's conditioning. While we learned to suppress our humanity, 11 leaked it everywhere. She'd trace letters in the dirt during exercise periods, mouth words that weren't numbers when she thought mother wasn't watching. You're not 4, she'd breathe during lights out. You're something that starts with J. I can tell by how your hands shake when the little ones cry. I turned 13 when mother unveiled her refinement protocol. Daily performance metrics in mathematics, memory, endurance. The lowest scorer faced recalibration. We discovered what that meant when 15 vanished overnight. Mother announced at breakfast, 15 has been redistributed. 16, adjust your designation accordingly. Existing as numbers meant watching 11 suffer for every human impulse. The deprivation chamber for laughing when 3 tripped. Calorie restriction for drawing shapes in her mashed potatoes. Chemical baths for singing fragments of melodies. Yet she persisted, stayed broken, stayed real. By my 18th year, I'd accumulated resources from mother's excellence rewards. Cash she paid for exceptional compliance. 11 and I crafted our escape. We'd flee during the annual demonstration. When mother showcased her system to potential investors seeking to replicate her methods, we'd take the younger digits. The night before departure, 11 pressed her forehead to mine, worth 7 days of sensory deprivation. I'm Sarah, she whispered, and you're James. I've been saving that name for you. We reached the bus station before mother's security team intercepted us. Private contractors, discreet and efficient. They returned us to the estate, but not before 11 had done something irreversible. She'd mailed a package from the station, told me she'd sent evidence to someone who'd understand. Mother's retaliation was methodical. 11 disappeared into the sub-level for intensive reconditioning. Her screams filtered through the ventilation system for days. The remaining numbers were prohibited from acknowledging my existence. I became void data. But mother had miscalculated. She'd trained us to be precise, to identify patterns, to solve complex problems, and I'd mastered her own system. During her fixation on breaking 11, I accessed her private study. Years as her star performer meant knowing her habits, her passwords, her hidden spaces. I located the records, the acquisition documents, the videos documenting our development. But most damning were her personal journals, where she detailed every experiment, every protocol, every child who'd been redistributed. But I'd underestimated her paranoia. She'd installed monitoring systems I hadn't detected, cameras in places I'd never imagined. She knew about my infiltration before I'd even left her study. The next morning, she called a special assembly. 11 was there, blank-eyed and silent. Mother smiled that cold smile of hers. 4 has demonstrated initiative, she announced. Unauthorized initiative. This requires correction. She produced a remote control. You see, 4, every number in this collection has been fitted with a small device, a failsafe I installed during your routine medical examinations. One button, and any number can be zeroed out. My blood froze. The other numbers stood perfectly still, but I could see the terror in their eyes. However, Mother continued, I'm willing to negotiate. Return what you took. Submit to reconditioning, and I'll allow the others to remain functional. 11's eyes flickered to mine, just for a second. But in that second, I saw something that stopped my heart. She mouthed a single word. Run. Mother's thumb hovered over the remote. You have 30 seconds to decide. 4, 29, 28. I looked at the younger numbers. At 2, who still sucked her thumb when she thought no one was watching. At 7, who'd just learned to tie his shoes. At 11, Sarah, who'd given me a name when I'd forgotten I deserved one. 20, 19, 18. The evidence I'd stolen was hidden in the old groundskeeper's shed, enough to destroy her. But at what cost? 10, 9, 8. 11 stepped forward. I'll take his reconditioning, she said. Double duration. Let him comply. Mother's smile widened. How touching. A number displaying sacrifice. But no. 4 must choose. 3, 2. I opened my mouth to surrender, to save them all. But 11 moved first. She lunged for the remote, her fingers barely grazing it before Mother yanked it away. 1. Mother pressed the button. Nothing happened. The remote clicked uselessly in Mother's hand. She pressed again and again. Her composed mask cracked, revealing something I'd never seen before. Confusion. 11 straightened from her lunge position, a ghost of her old smile flickering across her face. The other numbers remained frozen, but I caught subtle shifts in their stances. 7's shoulders relaxed slightly. 2 stopped holding her breath. Mother examined the remote, turning it over in her manicured hands. Her eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. She looked at 11 with newfound calculation. Clever, Mother said, her voice regaining its clinical detachment. You tampered with the frequency modulator during your last reconditioning session. The tools in the sublevel. You've been planning this. 11 said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. She'd endured days of of torture not just as punishment, but as opportunity. While Mother focused on breaking her, she'd been dismantling the very systems meant to control us. Mother set the useless remote on the podium with deliberate care. No matter, hardware can be replaced, but software, she turned to address all of us. Software requires different methods of debugging. She walked to the wall panel and entered a code. The estate's lockdown protocol engaged. Steel shutters descended over windows. Electromagnetic locks sealed every exit. The familiar hum of the perimeter fence intensified. New parameters, Mother announced. Until 4 returns what was stolen, all numbers will participate in accelerated trials. We'll begin with endurance testing. No rest periods, no meal intervals. We'll see how long your solidarity lasts when you're running on empty. She gestured to the exercise area. Formation, now. We moved into position, but something had shifted. The perfect synchronization we'd maintained for years showed hairline fractures. 3 stumbled slightly. 9's arm trembled. These weren't signs of weakness. They were choices, small acts of defiance rippling through our ranks. Mother noticed too. Her jaw tightened. 12. Step forward. 12 was one of the youngest, barely 8 years old. He moved with reluctance I'd never seen from him before. Mother produced a stopwatch. You'll run laps until 4 complies. The rest will count aloud. Any errors in counting reset 12's progress. This was her specialty, turning us against each other, making our suffering interdependent. But as 12 began running, something unexpected happened. 1 started counting, but not in the mechanical way Mother demanded. There was rhythm to it, almost musical. 2 picked up the pattern, then 5. Soon, all 15 of us were counting in a cadence that transformed numbers into something else, something human. Mother's face darkened. She moved to the control panel again, adjusting settings. The temperature in the exercise area began dropping. Within minutes, our breath became visible. 12's pace faltered as his small body fought the cold. I stepped out of formation. Enough, Mother smiled. Ready to return my property? I'll get it. But 12 stops running first. You're hardly in a position to negotiate for. 11 moved to stand beside me, then 7, then others, one by one, until we formed a line between Mother and 12. The boy had stopped running, standing in the center of our protective formation, shivering. Mother's smile vanished. You think this is rebellion? You're malfunctioning code, nothing more. She pressed another sequence on the panel. Perhaps it's time for a system restore. Gas began hissing from vents in the ceiling. Not the knockout gas she'd used before. This had a different smell, sharp, chemical. My eyes started burning immediately. Dispersal positions, Mother commanded. Or I increased the concentration, but we didn't move. 11 grabbed my hand, 7 took my other one. A chain formed, all of us linked, surrounding 12. Our eyes streamed tears. Several of us started coughing, but we held. Something about Mother keeping detailed journals of every redistributed child strikes me as oddly careful for someone who claims numbers can't feel. Why document what happens to components unless she knows they're more than that? Mother watched us with something like fascination. Interesting. The corruption has spread further than I calculated. She shut off the gas. Very well, we'll try a different approach. She walked to her private exit, the one that led to her quarters. Before leaving, she turned back. You have 6 hours to return what you took for. After that, I implement the dissolution protocol. You've forced me to accelerate my timeline, but I've been preparing for this contingency. Some experiments require starting over with fresh subjects. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. We remained in formation for several seconds before 2 finally broke the silence with a sob. The sound shattered our composure. Numbers who hadn't shown emotion in years suddenly sagged with exhaustion, fear, relief. She's going to cull us all, 9 whispered. It was the first time I'd heard him speak without being directly addressed. No, 11 said firmly. She's going to try. There's a difference. I looked around at the others, at these children who'd just risked everything to protect one of our own. She's right. Mother made one critical error in her system. She taught us to think, to analyze, to solve problems. But we're trapped, 3 pointed out. The lockdown protocol has a manual override in the maintenance tunnel, 7 interrupted. I've seen the schematics during cleaning duty. More voices joined in. 6 knew the rotation schedule for the exterior cameras. 13 had memorized the property layout beyond the walls. 10 had been stockpiling food in a hidden cache. They'd all been preparing, just like 11 and I. We weren't numbers. We were people who'd learned to survive by pretending to be numbers. The evidence I took, I said. It's not just about exposing her. It's leverage. But we need to get it and get out. All of us. The little ones can't travel far. 15, now 14 observed. 2, 3, and 12, especially. The package I sent, 11 said quietly. It went to a journalist who's been investigating disappearances in the pharmaceutical industry. She has a safe house 2 hours north. If we can reach the main road. A bang echoed from Mother's quarters. Then another. The sound of equipment being moved or assembled. We need to move, I said. 6 hours isn't really 6 hours. Not with Mother. She's already started whatever she's planning. We split into groups. 7 led a team to the maintenance tunnel. 11 took others to gather supplies and the younger children. I headed for the groundskeeper's shed with 9 and 13. The shed stood at the property's edge, abandoned since Mother had automated the landscaping. Inside, beneath rotting floorboards, I'd hidden a waterproof case containing everything. Acquisition documents, financial records, video files, and Mother's journals. Enough to destroy her and save us. As I retrieved it, 13 kept watch while 9 studied the journal I handed him. His face paled. 4. These redistribution records. She didn't send them to other facilities. I knew what he'd found. The real reason children who scored lowest disappeared. Why we never heard from them again. Mother didn't redistribute failures. She eliminated them. The journal contained addresses, burial sites, names that had once been numbers. We make sure no one else becomes a statistic, I said, starting with us. We returned to find organized chaos. 7's team had accessed the maintenance tunnel, but reported bad news. The manual override had been removed. Mother had anticipated that escape route. But 10 had an idea. The old heating system ran parallel to the tunnel. It connected to an external maintenance shed just beyond the fence. It's a tight fit, 10 explained, and it'll be hot, but the younger ones can make it. What about the rest of us? 6 asked. We go through the front, I said. Everyone stared at me. Mother expects us to sneak out, to run like the frightened children she believes we are. But we're not children anymore, and we're done running. 11 understood first. A distraction. Draw her attention while the little ones escape. More than that, I said, holding up the case. We're going to make her choose her life's work or her freedom, because once this evidence goes goes public, she'll have bigger problems than us. We spent the next 2 hours preparing. The younger children practiced crawling through the heating ducts with 10 as their guide. The older ones gathered anything useful. Tools, medical supplies, Mother's own surveillance equipment turned to our advantage. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Mother's voice echoed through the speakers. I'm disappointed. I gave you 6 hours. You've wasted 2. The dissolution protocol begins now. A new smell filled the air. Sweet, cloying, different from the gas earlier. Several of us started feeling dizzy immediately. This wasn't meant to incapacitate. It was meant to cull, slowly. Masks, 11 shouted. We'd prepared for this, fashioning crude protection from medical supplies. It wouldn't last long, but it might buy time. I grabbed the intercom. Mother, I have your journals. All of them, including the burial locations. You have 10 minutes to shut down the protocol and open the doors. Silence. Then, you're bluffing. I read aloud from her journal, selecting a particularly damning entry about her early experiments, her failures, the children who died before she'd perfected her methods. Details only she could have written. The gas stopped flowing. What do you want? Open the doors, all of them. Then go to your study and wait. If you think 9 minutes, I interrupted. Then I upload everything to the journalist 11 contacted. She's expecting my call. We waited. The little ones were already in the heating ducts, 10 leading them to safety. The rest of us stood ready. Finally, the locks disengaged. Doors opened throughout the compound, but Mother wasn't in her study. She stood in the main corridor, holding something I'd never seen before. A syringe filled with clear liquid. You want to leave? She said. Fine, but you'll leave as you arrived, as nothing. This contains a neural inhibitor I developed. It won't kill you. It will simply erase you. Your memories, your learned behaviors, everything I gave you. You gave us nothing, 11 said. We made ourselves. Mother laughed. You made yourselves? You can't even remember your real names. Your family sold you or abandoned you. I gave you purpose, structure, identity. You gave us numbers, I said. We found our own names. She moved faster than I expected, lunging at the nearest child, 6. But 6 had trained for years under Mother's physical regimen. He sidestepped, and suddenly we all moved, not to attack, but to surround her, to contain her. You taught us patterns, 7 said. Probability, added 9. Group dynamics, 13 continued. Problem solving, 11 smiled. And the solution, I concluded, is leaving. Mother tried to break through our circle, but we moved as one. Every technique she'd taught us, we used against her. When she finally stopped struggling, breathing hard, I saw something in her eyes I'd never witnessed before. Fear. You need me, she gasped. You don't know how to survive out there. You're not prepared for the real world. Maybe not, I admitted, but we'll learn. Together. We left her there, contained but unharmed. The evidence would be enough to ensure she faced justice. As we walked through the open doors, I heard her calling after us. Not our numbers, our names, the ones she'd claimed we never had. Outside, 10 had successfully led the younger ones through the heating system. They waited by the maintenance shed, dirty but safe. 2 ran to us, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, human tears. The walk to the main road took 3 hours. We moved carefully, staying together, watching for any pursuit, but none came. Perhaps Mother finally understood that her experiment had succeeded in a way she'd never intended. She'd tried to create perfect, emotionless tools. Instead, she'd forged survivors. The journalist 11 had contacted waited at the designated spot with a van and a team from Child Services. Real help, real hope. As we climbed aboard, I handed over the evidence case. This is everything? The journalist asked. Everything about her, I said, but not everything about us. Because we were more than evidence, more than numbers. We were James and Sarah and all the names we'd chosen or remembered. We were the children who'd refused to disappear. The van pulled away from the mountain. In the distance, the estate looked smaller than I'd ever imagined. Just buildings and walls that had once seemed insurmountable. Now they were nothing more than a bad memory growing smaller in the rearview mirror. 11, Sarah squeezed my hand. Around us, our family, strange and broken and beautiful, headed toward lives we'd design ourselves. No numbers, no protocols, no equations, just us, and that was enough. The van's engine hummed as we descended the mountain road, but my mind raced with calculations. Mother never accepted defeat. In 18 years, I'd watched her adapt to every setback, pivot from every failure. The journalist driving glanced at us through the rearview mirror, her expression a mixture of horror and determination after hearing our initial account. 10 minutes into our descent, 7 spotted it first, a black SUV trailing 3 cars behind, maintaining perfect distance. Then another, merging from a side road. Mother's pharmaceutical connections ran deep. Private security firms owed her favors. The journalist noticed our tension and accelerated slightly. The SUVs matched our speed. Beside me, 11's hand tightened on mine. 2 whimpered softly, and 12 pressed closer to 10. We'd escaped the estate, but Mother's reach extended far beyond those walls. Mother's bringing syringes to a chess match where the kids already took her queen, her king, and probably her car keys too. Nothing says, I've lost control, quite like threatening to turn everyone into blank slates when they've just outsmarted you using your own teaching methods. Our driver took an unexpected turn onto a narrow mountain road. The SUVs followed. She pulled out her phone, making a quick call while navigating the winding path. I caught fragments of her conversation about backup and safe house locations. The Child Services team in the second van behind us had already noticed our tail. 20 minutes of tense maneuvering followed. The journalist proved surprisingly adept at evasive driving, using her knowledge of local roads to maintain distance. Eventually, we lost the SUVs in a maze of suburban streets, pulling into a nondescript garage attached to a modest house. Inside, the reality of our situation crystallized. 17 children, most without birth certificates or legal identities. The journalist, Allison, explained the complications while the Child Services team made calls. Mother had operated in legal gray areas, using her pharmaceutical research credentials to justify housing test subjects. Proving abuse would require more than our testimony. The evidence I'd stolen became our lifeline. Allison spent hours reviewing Mother's journals with growing disgust. The videos showed enough to build a case, but legal proceedings would take months. During that time, we'd need placement, protection, and most critically, we'd need to stay together. That first night, we slept in sleeping bags on Allison's living room floor. Old habits died hard. We arranged ourselves shelves in numerical order before 11 laughed and deliberately moved to a random spot. Others followed, choosing positions based on comfort rather than assignment. I stayed awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the suburban neighborhood, wondering when Mother would make her next move. She didn't wait long. The next morning, Allison received a call from her editor. Dr. Patty Walsh's lawyers had contacted the newspaper, threatening lawsuits if any story ran. They claimed the children were participants in a legitimate behavioral study, that we'd been legally placed in her care, that running the story would violate medical privacy laws and damage important pharmaceutical research. More disturbing were the individual files Mother's lawyers produced. Forged documents showing each of us had severe behavioral problems, histories of violence, psychological disorders requiring intensive treatment. According to these papers, we were dangerous, unstable. Our testimony couldn't be trusted. Allison slammed her laptop shut in frustration after reading the legal threats. The child services team looked increasingly uncomfortable. I saw doubt creeping into their expressions. Mother had spent years building her reputation, while we were just children with numbers for names. 5 was the first to break. On our third day in the safe house, while Allison worked to verify our stories and find legal representation, 5 approached the child services coordinator privately. I noticed him speaking quietly in the corner, gesturing nervously. His eyes kept darting to the rest of us, then away. That evening, 5 wouldn't meet anyone's gaze during dinner. 11 tried to engage him, but he remained silent. The next morning, he was gone. The coordinator explained he'd requested separate placement, claimed he felt unsafe with the group. Mother had gotten to him somehow, promised him something, threatened him, or both. His departure shook everyone. If 5 could turn, who else might follow? The younger ones grew clingy, afraid to let the older children out of sight. Trust, fragile as it was, began fracturing. Allison worked tirelessly, but obstacles mounted. The journalist who'd been investigating pharmaceutical disappearances suddenly faced an IRS audit. 2 other reporters who'd expressed interest in our story received cease and desist letters. Mother's influence in the pharmaceutical industry created a chilling effect. Worse, the safe house location had been compromised. Allison noticed the same cars passing repeatedly. Someone had followed us from the grocery store. We needed to move, but resources were limited. The child services budget didn't account for protecting 17 children from a pharmaceutical executive with deep pockets and deeper connections. 8 was next to crack. During our relocation to a new safe house, 8 lingered by the van, claiming stomach problems. When we finally got him inside, he seemed different, distracted. That night, I caught him trying to use Allison's laptop. He claimed he wanted to play games, but I'd seen him attempting to access her email. I confronted him privately. 8 broke down, admitting Mother had contacted him through a child services worker she'd compromised. She'd promised him things, a real name, a family placement, college funding. All he had to do was report our location and plans. The betrayal stung, but I understood. We'd been conditioned to survive by compliance. 8 was simply following his programming. I told 11 and Allison, and we decided to use it to our advantage. We fed 8 false information about our plans, hoping to misdirect Mother's resources. Meanwhile, the younger children struggled with freedom. 2 refused to eat unless given exact portions. 3 couldn't sleep without someone counting aloud. 12 kept asking for his daily assignments. The psychological damage ran deeper than any of us had realized. Allison arranged for a therapist, but even that simple act became complicated when the therapist received anonymous threats about treating us. 2 weeks into our escape, Mother played a devastating card. Child services received documentation suggesting that 11 and I had manipulated the younger children, that we were the true abusers who'd seized control after Mother tried to reform her program. The documents included selectively edited video footage from the estate's cameras, showing us leading exercises and managing the younger numbers. Out of context, it looked damning. The investigation that followed nearly destroyed us. Child services separated us for individual interviews. The younger ones, confused and frightened, sometimes gave contradictory accounts. Their inability to remember life before the estate, their lack of traditional names, their strange behaviors, all seemed to support Mother's narrative that they needed specialized care. 13 surprised me by becoming our strongest advocate. Usually quiet and compliant, she began documenting everything. She helped the younger ones practice telling their stories clearly. She created charts showing the inconsistencies in Mother's forged documents. When investigators questioned her, she responded with precise, logical arguments that dismantled Mother's lies piece by piece. But Mother's pressure increased. Allison's editor ordered her to drop the story. Her mortgage company suddenly found errors requiring immediate payment. Her car was vandalized twice. The message was clear: abandon these children or lose everything. Allison refused to give up, but I saw the strain wearing on her. She'd taken leave from work, spent her savings on legal consultations, turned her life upside down for children she'd known less than a month. Mother counted on people's self-preservation instincts. She didn't understand that some people, like Allison, could be as stubborn as 11. The safe house felt increasingly like another prison. We couldn't attend school without documentation. We couldn't work without identity papers. We couldn't even use our chosen names legally. Mother had trapped us in a bureaucratic limbo, hoping we'd voluntarily return to the estate for the structure we'd known. 6 weeks after our escape, she made her boldest move. A woman arrived at the safe house claiming to be 3's biological mother. She had documents, photos, a birth certificate. She sobbed as she described searching for her daughter for years. 3, confused and hopeful, wanted to believe. We all did. The idea that our families might want us back was a dream we'd never dared voice. Allison investigated quietly. The woman's story had holes, but they were subtle, small inconsistencies that could be explained by trauma and time. 3 began spending supervised visits with her, returning each time more conflicted. The woman was kind, bought her gifts, promised a normal life. I followed them once, keeping distance. The woman took 3 to a park, bought her ice cream, pushed her on swings, normal mother-daughter activities, but I noticed how she kept checking her phone, how her smiles never quite reached her eyes, how she asked probing questions about the rest of us. My suspicions proved correct when 9 discovered the truth. Using skills learned from years of observing Mother's computer work, he'd managed to trace the woman's background. She was an actress, hired through internet intermediaries. The real genius was that she genuinely believed she was reuniting with her daughter, fed a false story about custody battles and illegal adoption. Mother had layered her deception so deeply that even her pawns were victims. Revealing this truth to Three nearly broke her. She'd allowed herself to hope, to imagine a life beyond numbers and protocols. The actress, when confronted with evidence, was horrified to learn she'd been used. She provided Allison with documentation of who'd hired her, though the trail led to shell companies and dead ends. This betrayal shifted something in the group. Where before we'd been reactive, defensive, now anger simmered. Mother had attacked our hope itself. Even the youngest understood the cruelty of that deception. We'd survived physical deprivation, psychological manipulation, but this emotional torture sparked something new, the desire to fight back. Allison's investigation, despite obstacles, had uncovered patterns. Other children who'd disappeared over the years, families who'd been paid or threatened into silence, former employees of Mother's who'd quit abruptly, bound by non-disclosure agreements. Allison's getting IRS audits and car vandalism just for helping these kids. There's something bigger happening here that we're only seeing pieces of. Why does a pharmaceutical executive have this much reach into government agencies and private companies? The scope was larger than just us 17. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I volunteered to meet with Mother's lawyers. Allison advised against it, but I needed to face them, to show we weren't scared children anymore. 11 insisted on coming, and together we sat across from 3 attorneys in expensive suits. They presented their offer with clinical detachment, returned to the estate voluntarily, signed documents admitting we'd misunderstood the nature of Mother's program. In exchange, college funds would be established, identities would be created, and we'd be transitioned to independent living over 2 years. It was generous, reasonable, everything a group of traumatized children should want. I responded by sliding copies of Mother's journal entries across the table, the ones detailing the failed experiments, the burial locations. The lawyers' expressions didn't change, but I caught one loosening his tie slightly. They requested time to consult with their client. That night, the retaliation came swiftly. The new safe house lost power, then water. Allison's phone rang constantly with anonymous threats. 2 woke, screaming from nightmares about the deprivation chamber. 7 found a window broken, glass scattered across his sleeping bag. The message was clear: refuse the offer, suffer the consequences. But something had changed in us. Instead of cowering, we adapted. 10 rigged a backup power system using car batteries. 13 organized a watch schedule. The younger ones moved their sleeping bags away from windows. We'd learned to survive Mother's estate. We could survive her attacks. Allison, meanwhile, had found an ally, a former prosecutor named Theodore, who'd been disbarred for refusing to drop a case against a pharmaceutical company. He couldn't practice law, but he knew people, understood the system. Most importantly, he believed us. Theodore's approach was different. Instead of fighting Mother's lawyers directly, he began filing requests for documentation, birth certificates, medical records, school transcripts. Every request forced Mother's team to produce more forged documents, each containing small inconsistencies that Theodore meticulously cataloged. The pressure affected everyone differently. 12 developed a stutter. 2 stopped eating again. 6 jumped at every sound. But 11 remained our anchor, creating new routines that felt nothing like Mother's protocols. Morning stretches became dance sessions. Meal times included storytelling. She taught the younger ones card games, helping them understand that numbers could be fun, not just assignments. 8's guilt over his betrayal led to unexpected redemption. He confessed everything to Allison, including passwords and contact methods Mother's people had given him. This information proved invaluable, allowing us to feed false intelligence while learning more about Mother's network. 3 months after our escape, the investigation took a darker turn. Theodore discovered that Mother's pharmaceutical company had been testing experimental compounds. Nothing overtly illegal, but the implications were chilling. Some of the vitamins we'd taken daily were cognitive enhancers, mood regulators, experimental substances designed to increase compliance and reduce emotional responses. The medical examinations that followed revealed varying levels of these substances in our systems. The younger children showed higher concentrations, explaining some of their behavioral challenges. Detoxing would take months, possibly years. Some effects might be permanent. Mother hadn't just stolen our childhoods, she'd altered our brain chemistry. This discovery changed the legal landscape. Experimental substance testing on children, even with forged consent, crossed into criminal territory. But Mother's lawyers argued we couldn't prove when or how these substances were administered. The estate's medical records had conveniently suffered a system failure, destroying years of data. 9's technical skills proved crucial again. He'd noticed patterns in the estate's computer systems during his time there. Backup protocols Mother probably didn't know existed. Working with Theodore, they recovered fragments of deleted files. Not enough for a smoking GN, but sufficient to establish patterns of systematic drugging. The younger children's recovery became more complex as the substances left their systems. 3 experienced severe mood swings. 2's anxiety skyrocketed without the chemical suppressants. 12's stutter worsened before gradually improving. We watched them struggle through withdrawals from substances they'd never known they were taking. Support came from unexpected sources. The actress who'd posed as 3's mother, horrified by her unwitting role, became an advocate. She used her connections in the entertainment industry to raise awareness, carefully skirting legal boundaries. A documentary filmmaker expressed interest, though Mother's lawyers immediately threatened any network that might air it. 4 months into our freedom, cracks appeared in Mother's armor. A former estate employee, protected by Theodore's connections, agreed to testify. She'd been the cook, responsible for preparing our carefully measured meals. She'd kept personal records of the supplements she'd been required to add, troubled by the secrecy surrounding them. Her testimony provided the first insider confirmation of Mother's methods. She described the precise measurements, the color-coded pills, the strict instructions to never deviate from prescribed amounts. She'd quit when she'd realized the children were being drugged, but fear and legal threats had kept her silent until now. This breakthrough triggered a cascade. Other former employees, emboldened by the cook's courage, began reaching out. A maintenance worker who'd installed the punishment chambers, a nurse who'd administered the medical exams. Each carried pieces of the puzzle, fragments of guilt they'd been carrying for years. Mother's response was predictable but desperate. She held a press conference, presenting herself as a misunderstood visionary, trying to help troubled children. She produced testimonials from respected colleagues who'd never set foot on the estate. She announced a new research initiative to help at-risk youth, attempting to rebrand herself as a reformer. The media response was mixed. Some outlets ran sympathetic pieces about a brilliant woman facing persecution. Others dug deeper, finding inconsistencies in her narrative. Allison's newspaper finally agreed to run a limited series, focusing on the pharmaceutical testing angle rather than our personal stories. Five returned during this period. He appeared at the safe house one evening, thin and haunted. The placement Mother had arranged for him had been another form of prison, a therapeutic boarding school that used similar methods. He'd escaped using techniques we'd all learned at the estate, making his way back to the only family he knew. His return strengthened our resolve, but also revealed Mother's broader network. The school he'd escaped from was one of several institutions using her methods. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore, but for unknown children trapped in similar programs. The legal battles intensified. Depositions stretched for hours as Mother's lawyers attempted to discredit us. They highlighted our lack of traditional education, our unusual behaviors, our inability to provide normal childhood memories. Each session felt like another form of torture, forcing us to relive trauma while being told it was for our own good. 13 emerged as our unexpected legal strategist. Her logical mind dissected every argument, preparing the rest of us for questions designed to confuse or trap. She created flashcards, practice sessions, mock depositions. Under her guidance, even the younger children learned to testify clearly and consistently. The financial pressure on Allison and Theodore mounted. Legal fees, safe house expenses, medical costs for our recovery, it all added up. Mother's resources seemed infinite, while ours dwindled daily. We tried to contribute however we could. The older children took whatever cash jobs didn't require documentation. We sold crafts at local markets. Every dollar felt like a small victory against Mother's empire. 6 months after our escape, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Eleven's package, mailed during our first escape attempt, had reached its destination but been delayed by bureaucratic confusion. The recipient, a journalist who'd lost her own daughter years ago, had been traveling abroad. When she finally received and opened it, she found something none of us had known Eleven had taken: Mother's backup drives. These drives contained years of video footage, medical records, correspondence with pharmaceutical companies, and most damning recordings of Mother discussing her true objectives: not helping children, but creating a new class of chemically compliant workers for industries requiring absolute obedience. The legal landscape shifted overnight. Criminal charges were now possible. Mother's pharmaceutical company stock plummeted. Several board members distanced themselves. The boarding schools using her methods faced investigations. Our case had become a catalyst for examining the dark edges of behavioral modification programs, but Mother didn't surrender. She disappeared from public view, her lawyers claiming she was receiving treatment for stress-related illness. Her estate was shuttered, though not before all remaining evidence was mysteriously destroyed in a fire. She'd gone underground, but her influence remained. We learned to live with constant vigilance. Every new person was potentially suspect. Every offer of help might be another trap. The younger children struggled with paranoia, jumping at shadows. Therapy helped, but trust came slowly. 4 just turned their meeting with fancy lawyers into show and tell with burial maps. Nothing says, "We decline your kind offer," quite like handing over evidence of where the bodies are buried, literally. We'd been programmed for suspicion, and that programming ran deep. Allison's dedication never wavered, even as her life unraveled around her. She'd lost her job, her savings, many of her friends who couldn't understand her obsession with helping us. Yet she persisted, driven by something stronger than logic. Perhaps she saw in us the children she'd never had, or perhaps she simply understood that some fights are worth everything. Theodore worked tirelessly to build our case, but the legal system moved slowly. Motions and counter-motions, delays and postponements. Mother's lawyers used every tactic to drag out proceedings, hoping we'd break from exhaustion. They didn't understand that we'd been trained for endurance, just not in the way Mother had intended. 7 months into our freedom, patterns emerged in our recovery. The older children adapted more quickly to the outside world, though we all carried invisible scars. The younger ones struggled more, their entire conscious lives having been spent as numbers. 2 finally chose a name, Allison, after the woman who'd saved us. Others followed slowly, trying on identities like clothes, seeing what fit. The documentary filmmaker, working carefully within legal constraints, began interviewing former employees and experts in childhood development. The picture that emerged was of a systematic program designed to strip away humanity and create perfect workers. Mother's vision was horrifying in its scope, her methods precisely calculated to break down personality while maintaining functionality. We learned that some of the redistributed children had survived, placed in other programs or institutions. Theodore worked to track them down, building a network of survivors. Each reunion was bittersweet, joy at finding lost siblings mixed with horror at what they'd endured. Not all had been as fortunate as us. Some bore physical scars, others had retreated so far into themselves that reaching them seemed impossible. 8 months after our escape, the first criminal trial began. Not against Mother directly, she remained hidden, but against several employees who'd participated in the drugging. We testified, one by one, describing our experiences in clinical detail. The defense tried to paint us as confused, manipulated by Allison and Theodore, unable to distinguish between legitimate medical treatment and abuse. Eleven's testimony proved pivotal. She spoke clearly about the substance's effects, how they'd clouded her thoughts while leaving her aware enough to resist. She described the punishment protocols in detail that made several jurors visibly uncomfortable. Most powerfully, she explained how Mother's system had tried to erase not just our names, but our humanity itself. The guilty verdicts felt hollow. Low-level employees faced consequences while Mother remained free. But it was a start. More importantly, it established legal precedent. What had been done to us was criminal, not experimental. We were victims, not subjects. The media attention following the trial brought unexpected challenges. Suddenly, everyone wanted our story. Book deals, movie rights, exclusive interviews. The money could have solved our financial problems, but at what cost? We'd spent years as mother's exhibits. None of us wanted to become different kinds of specimens. We made a collective decision to control our own narrative. Allison helped us establish a foundation for children in similar situations. The older children began speaking at conferences about behavioral modification programs. We turned our trauma into advocacy, warning others about the signs of institutional abuse. 9 months after our escape, Mother made her move. Not directly, but through proxies. A new company emerged, offering revolutionary therapeutic services for troubled youth. The methods seemed different on the surface, but we recognized the underlying patterns, the precise scheduling, the numerical assessments, the gradual erosion of individual identity. This new threat galvanized us. We'd been playing defense, reacting to Mother's moves. Now, we went on offense. Using the skills she'd taught us, pattern recognition, problem solving, systematic analysis, we began mapping her network. Every connection, every financial trail, every person who'd enabled her work. The investigation revealed the true scope of Mother's influence. Pharmaceutical companies using her compliance substances in other contexts. Military contractors interested in creating obedient soldiers. Corporations seeking perfectly efficient workers. Our story was just one thread in a tapestry of human experimentation hiding behind legitimate research. 10 months after our escape, we received word that shook us all. Mother had been spotted in Switzerland, establishing a new research facility. International law made prosecution complicated, but the revelation that she was attempting to restart her program abroad sparked global concern. Our testimony had impact beyond our borders. The younger children showed remarkable resilience as they adapted to freedom. 12's stutter faded as his confidence grew. 3 learned to trust again after the false mother incident. 2, now Allison, began showing artistic talents that would have been suppressed at the estate. They were becoming who they might have always been without Mother's interference. We older children faced different challenges. The world expected us to integrate seamlessly, to be grateful for our freedom and move forward. But trauma doesn't follow convenient timelines. We struggled with relationships, unable to trust affection without suspecting manipulation. We excelled academically, our training serving us well, but social situations remained minefields. 11 and I grew closer through shared understanding. We'd given each other names when names were forbidden. Now we gave each other space to heal while remaining constants in each other's lives. Not quite siblings, more than friends. We were something unique, survivors of the same specific hell. 11 months after our escape, the breakthrough came. A whistleblower from Mother's Swiss facility contacted Theodore. The new program was failing. Without the complete control of the estate, without the years of conditioning, Mother's methods were proving ineffective. More importantly, her investors were asking questions about the previous program's outcomes. This insider provided crucial intelligence. Financial records showing the flow of money from pharmaceutical companies to Mother's research. Communications discussing the potential applications of her compliance substances. Most damning correspondence where Mother discussed us not as children, but as proof of concept for a larger project. The international attention forced action. Swiss authorities raided the facility, finding evidence of unauthorized substance testing. Mother fled again, but her options were narrowing. Countries were closing their doors to her research. Her reputation in the pharmaceutical industry was toxic. The empire she'd built on our suffering was crumbling. We marked our first year of freedom with mixed emotions. We'd survived, grown, begun healing, but we weren't truly free while Mother remained at large and other children remained trapped in similar programs. Our fight had evolved from personal survival to systemic change. The foundation we'd established grew beyond our expectations. Donations poured in from people horrified by our story. We funded legal challenges to behavioral modification programs, supported other survivors, and pushed for legislation requiring transparency in youth treatment facilities. Our numbers had become names, and our names had become voices for change. Yet challenges remained. Some of us struggled more than others. 6 developed severe anxiety that medication couldn't fully address. 14 cycled through depression that seemed linked to the withdrawal from Mother's substances. We supported each other, but some wounds ran too deep for simple solidarity to heal. Allison's health suffered from the stress of the past year. The woman who'd saved us was paying a price for her compassion. We rallied around her as she'd rallied around us, taking turns caring for her during a brief hospitalization. The irony wasn't lost on us. Children trained to suppress emotion, learning to express love through action. Theodore continued building cases against Mother's enablers. Each conviction was a small victory, dismantling the network piece by piece. But the legal process was exhausting. We spent countless hours in depositions, trials, hearings. Every testimony meant reliving our trauma, but also reclaiming our narrative from those who'd tried to erase it. 13 months after our escape, we received unexpected news. Mother had been arrested in Morocco, attempting to establish yet another facility. The international warrant had finally caught up with her. Extradition would be complex, but for the first time, she was in custody. Her arrest triggered a media frenzy. Our story, which had faded from headlines, returned with intensity. Reporters camped outside the safe house. Our photos, the few that existed, circulated widely. The attention was overwhelming for children who'd been trained to be invisible. We made another collective decision. Rather than hide, we'd face the media on our terms. 11 and I, as the oldest, gave a single press conference. We spoke not just for ourselves, but for all the numbers who'd been erased. We named the redistributed children who'd never left the estate. We demanded justice not just for us, but for the broader system that had enabled Mother's work. The response was overwhelming. Other survivors came forward, not just from Mother's programs, but from similar facilities worldwide. Our story had become a catalyst for examining how society treats vulnerable children. The foundation received more requests for help than we could handle. Our fight had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. As extradition proceedings began, Mother's lawyers mounted a predictable logical defense. Theodore tracking down the redistributed children makes me wonder if Mother kept records of where she sent them, or if he's piecing together fragments. The employees facing charges while she stays hidden suggests someone's protecting her interests even now. She was a visionary, misunderstood. Her methods were extreme, but effective. The children in her care had been troubled, dangerous. Without her intervention, we would have become burdens on society. Every argument reinforced how she saw us, not as humans, but as problems to be solved. We countered with our own narrative. Yes, some of us had come from difficult circumstances, but Mother hadn't saved us. She'd exploited our vulnerability. Her methods hadn't helped us. They'd nearly destroyed us. We were succeeding now, not because of her training, but in spite of it. The younger children began attending real schools, integrating slowly but steadily. Their progress reports became our victories. Every friendship formed, every subject mastered without chemical enhancement, every moment of genuine joy was proof that Mother had been wrong. Children didn't need to be optimized. They needed to be loved. 15 months after our escape, Mother was extradited to face trial. Seeing her in custody was surreal. The woman who'd controlled every aspect of our lives now controlled nothing. She sat in court, still composed, still treating the proceedings like an experiment to be observed. But her power over us had evaporated. The trial preparation intensified everything. Prosecutors needed detailed testimony about specific incidents. Defense attorneys would challenge every memory, every claim. We spent weeks preparing, reliving moments we'd tried to forget, but we faced it together, drawing strength from our shared survival. Some of us chose not to testify, the trauma too fresh. Others found power in speaking truth to the woman who'd tried to silence us. The younger ones provided written statements, their words carrying weight beyond their years. Each testimony built the case against not just Mother, but the entire system she'd created. As the trial date approached, we reflected on how far we'd come, from numbers to names, from property to people, from silence to voices that couldn't be ignored. The journey was far from over. Healing would take lifetimes, but we'd already achieved what Mother had deemed impossible. We'd remained human despite every attempt to erase our humanity. The safe house had become a real home. Allison had formally adopted several of the younger children, while others had found placements with families who understood their unique needs. Some of us aged out into independent living, but we remained connected. The bonds forged in trauma had evolved into something healthier, chosen family. 18 months after our escape, as Mother's trial began, we stood ready. Not as numbers in her experiment, but as individuals with names, stories, and futures she'd tried to steal. Whatever the verdict, we'd already won the only victory that truly mattered. We'd survived. We'd retained our humanity. And we'd ensured that no other child would endure what we had, at least not in Mother's facilities. The fight against systematic dehumanization would continue beyond one trial, one woman, one program. But we'd proven that even the most carefully designed system of control could be overcome by the simple, irrepressible human need to be more than numbers, to be seen, to be heard, to be human. As I sat in the courtroom, surrounded by my chosen family, I thought about the names we'd given ourselves. Not just labels, but declarations of existence. Mother had tried to reduce us to functions, but we'd insisted on being people. That insistence, that refusal to be erased, was our greatest rebellion and our greatest victory. The trial would determine Mother's fate, but we'd already determined our own. We were survivors, advocates, and family. We were everything she'd said numbers could never be: significant, individual, irreplaceable. And as her empire of dehumanization crumbled around her, we stood as living proof that humanity, once awakened, could never be fully suppressed. The trial began on a Tuesday morning, 18 months after our escape. I sat in the witness waiting room with 11, our hands clasped tightly as we listened to the muffled sounds from the courtroom. Allison sat across from us, reviewing notes with Theodore. The younger children weren't required to appear, staying at the safe house with trusted caregivers. My name was called first. Walking into that courtroom, seeing Mother at the defendant's table, my body remembered every protocol she'd drilled into us. Stand straight, eyes forward, no unnecessary movements. But I wasn't 4 anymore. I was James, and I had a story to tell. The prosecutor began with simple questions about life at the estate. I described the daily schedules, the numerical system, the punishments for displaying emotion. Mother watched me with those calculating eyes, still trying to assess variables and outcomes. Her lawyer objected frequently, claiming I was embellishing, that my memories were compromised by the substances she'd allegedly administered. During cross-examination, Mother's defense attorney tried to paint me as ungrateful. He presented documents showing the resources Mother had spent on our education, our healthcare, our development. He asked if I understood that many children would have been grateful for such opportunities. I responded by describing the deprivation chamber, the forced drugging, the children who'd been redistributed and never seen again. The attorney pressed harder, suggesting Allison and Theodore had coached me, that I was confusing medical treatment with abuse. I remained calm, using the logical thinking Mother herself had taught me. I presented facts, not emotions, times, dates, specific incidents. The jury listened intently as I explained how we'd been systematically dehumanized. When I mentioned the burial sites documented in Mother's journal, her composure finally cracked. She leaned forward, whispering urgently to her lawyer. The prosecutor introduced the journal pages as evidence, and I identified Mother's handwriting, her precise notations about failed experiments. My testimony lasted 3 hours. As I left the stand, I passed Mother's table. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished without her estate walls and protocols to enforce her will. But her eyes still held that dangerous intelligence, still calculating how to regain control. 11 testified next. She spoke about the reconditioning sessions, the substances that clouded her thoughts, the systematic attempts to erase her humanity. She described finding her name, Sarah, and how that simple act of self-identification had been revolutionary. The defense tried to discredit her, suggesting her defective nature made her testimony unreliable. Sarah responded by reciting, with perfect accuracy, the chemical compounds in the substances we'd been given, their effects, their dosages. Mother's own training had created a witness against her. Over the following days, more testimony emerged. The cook who'd prepared our drugged meals broke down on the stand, describing describing her guilt at participating in Mother's program. The maintenance worker detailed the punishment chambers he'd installed, how Mother had specified exact dimensions to maximize psychological impact. Each witness added another piece to the picture of systematic abuse disguised as scientific research. Nine's testimony proved particularly damaging. Using his technical skills, he'd helped prosecutors understand the computer systems at the estate, the backup protocols that had preserved evidence Mother thought she'd destroyed. He walked the jury through deleted files, showing dosage schedules, punishment logs, and video footage of children being subjected to Mother's protocols. The defense couldn't argue with digital evidence. The younger children who chose to participate did so through written statements read by the prosecutor. Two's statement, written in careful handwriting, described the terror of not knowing her own name, of being punished for crying when she was scared. 12 wrote about running endless laps while we counted, how Mother had used his exhaustion to punish all of us. Their words carried weight beyond their years. Mother's defense began presenting their case in the second week. They called expert witnesses who testified about behavioral modification techniques, suggesting Mother's methods, while extreme, had scientific basis. They presented selective data showing our academic achievements, our physical health metrics, our problem-solving abilities. We were evidence of success, they argued, not abuse. But the prosecution countered each point. Yes, we could solve complex problems, but at what cost? We excelled academically because failure meant punishment. Our physical health had been maintained through forced exercise and controlled diets. We were high-functioning because we'd been chemically and psychologically programmed to be. The most difficult moment came when the defense called their surprise witness. 5. He entered the courtroom, avoiding eye contact with those of us in the gallery. On the stand, he testified that life at the estate hadn't been as bad as we claimed. He suggested we were exaggerating, that Mother had provided structure and purpose to children who'd had neither. During cross-examination, the prosecutor gently probed Five's current situation. It emerged that Mother's lawyers were paying for his apartment, his expenses, his future education. Five began crying as he admitted he'd been promised these things only if he testified favorably. His breakdown on the stand revealed more about Mother's methods than any hostile testimony could have. Allison testified about discovering us, about the obstacles Mother had created to prevent our story from being told. She detailed the threats, the legal harassment, the financial pressure. She'd kept meticulous records of every incident, every attempt to silence us. Her testimony showed how Mother's control extended far beyond the estate walls. Theodore presented the financial evidence he'd uncovered. Shell companies funneling money from pharmaceutical corporations to Mother's research. Patents filed for compliance substances based on formulations tested on us. Mother's defense calling Five as their star witness only to watch him crumble under the weight of his bought testimony. That's what happens when you try to purchase truth with apartment money. It tends to leak out through the tears. Plans for expanding the program internationally. The scope of Mother's vision became clear. We were prototypes for a larger project involving hundreds, possibly thousands of children. As the trial progressed, patterns emerged in the gallery. Former employees who'd remained silent for years came to observe. Some wept during testimony. Others sat stone-faced, wrestling with their complicity. One afternoon, a woman approached me during a break. She'd been a nurse at the estate years before I arrived. She pressed a flash drive into my hand, whispering that it contained medical records from the earliest days of Mother's program. More evidence of experiments, failures, children who'd disappeared. The prosecutor incorporated this new evidence into their case. The medical records showed a clear progression in Mother's methods, how she'd refined her techniques through trial and error. The error column was filled with names, children who'd suffered permanent damage or worse. We weren't her first attempts, just her most successful ones. Mother finally took a stand in her own defense. She spoke for hours about her vision, her belief that humanity could be improved through proper conditioning. She didn't deny her methods. Instead, she defended them as necessary for progress. She compared herself to misunderstood visionaries throughout history, suggesting future generations would vindicate her work. During cross-examination, the prosecutor asked simple questions. Did she refer to children by numbers instead of names? Yes, names created unnecessary attachment. Did she administer experimental substances without proper authorization? The compounds were vitamins and supplements, she claimed. Did she document the burial locations of failed experiments? She refused to answer, invoking her right against self-incrimination. The moment that changed everything came when the prosecutor asked about the remote control device. Mother's eyes flickered with something like pride as she explained the technology, how she'd developed a way to ensure absolute compliance through implanted devices. She'd been so focused on defending her methods that she didn't realize she'd just confessed to assault, illegal medical procedures, and attempted murder. Her lawyer tried to object, to stop her testimony, but Mother continued. She explained how the devices worked, how they could have been activated if 11 hadn't sabotaged the frequency modulator. She described this as a failure in her security protocols, rather than what it was, an admission of planning to call children who disobeyed. The jury deliberated for 2 days. We waited in Allison's home, unable to focus on anything else. The younger children could sense our tension, clustering together and speaking in whispers. When the call came that a verdict had been reached, we returned to the courthouse together, guilty on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, administering substances to minors without consent, attempted murder. The list went on. Mother stood perfectly still as each verdict was read, her expression unchanged. Even in defeat, she maintained her composure, treating this like another data point in her research. During the sentencing phase, we were allowed to give victim impact statements. I spoke about the children who weren't there, the ones who'd been redistributed and never found. 11 described the ongoing effects of the substances, how some of us still struggled with chemical dependencies we'd never chosen. The younger children's statements were read aloud, their words painting a picture of childhood stolen in the name of optimization. Mother received 40 years to life. As court officers led her away, she turned to look at us one last time. Her expression wasn't angry or defeated. It was curious, like we were still specimens she was observing. Even then, then, she couldn't see us as human. The pharmaceutical companies that had funded her research faced their own legal battles. Theodore helped build cases against executives who'd known about the child testing. Some fled the country. Others negotiated plea deals. The network Mother had built began collapsing. Though we knew similar programs still operated in shadows around the world. Five approached us after the sentencing, shoulders hunched with shame. He apologized through tears, explaining how Mother's lawyers had manipulated him, how they'd threatened to abandon him if he didn't cooperate. We understood. Mother had programmed us all to respond to authority, to fear abandonment. Five's betrayal was just another symptom of her conditioning. The estate was seized by authorities, evidence of crimes preserved for ongoing investigations. We were allowed one final visit before it was permanently closed. Walking through those halls without Mother's presence was surreal. The exercise area where we'd protected 12, the sub-level where 11 had endured reconditioning, the dining hall where we'd learned 15 had been redistributed. In Mother's study, I found something she'd hidden behind her books, a photo of herself as a child, standing with other children in matching uniforms. Numbers were pinned to their clothes. On the back, someone had written, Subjects 1 to 12, first trial, 1973. Mother hadn't just created our program. She'd been a product of someone else's experiment, perpetuating a cycle of dehumanization she'd never escaped. We took nothing from the estate except closure. The money from its sale would fund programs for children escaping similar situations. Mother's legacy of control would be transformed into resources for freedom. The younger children began thriving in their new lives. Two, who'd chosen the name Allison, started painting, filling canvases with colors she'd never been allowed to explore. 12 joined a youth soccer team, running for joy instead of punishment. 3 learned to trust her new adoptive family, slowly believing she deserved love without conditions. We older ones found different paths. 9 pursued computer science, using his skills to help authorities track down similar programs. 13 entered law school, determined to protect children through legal advocacy. 7 became a teacher, creating the kind of supportive classroom environment we'd never experienced. 11 and I remained close, bound by shared understanding. We attended therapy together, working through trauma that went deeper than words. Some days were harder than others. We'd find ourselves counting objects, organizing things in numerical order, fighting the urge to suppress emotions. Recovery wasn't linear, but we faced it together. Allison's health improved once the trial stress ended. She continued running the foundation we'd established, helping other survivors find resources and support. Her small house became a gathering place for our strange family, hosting dinners where numbers had become names and silence had become laughter. Theodore took on new cases, fighting against institutional abuse wherever he found it. He'd check in regularly, making sure we had what we needed, connecting us with resources. He'd become the protective figure many of us had never had, proving that family could be chosen rather than assigned. 1 year after the trial, we held a memorial for the redistributed children. We planted trees for each name we'd recovered from Mother's journals, creating a grove where numbers could be remembered as people. Local families attended, understanding that their community had harbored darkness but was choosing to create light. The pharmaceutical trials continued, exposing a network of companies willing to test on vulnerable populations. Our case had set precedent, making it harder for such programs to operate. We testified when needed, sharing our experiences to prevent others from enduring similar treatment. Some nights, I still dreamed about the estate, but now, the dreams ended differently. Instead of being trapped, we escaped. Instead of being numbers, we had names. Instead of Mother's control, we had each other's support. The nightmares were being rewritten by reality. 5 years later, I stood before a conference on institutional child abuse, sharing our story with professionals who could make change. In the audience, I saw 11, now a social worker. 9, consulting on digital security for youth facilities. 13, preparing legal challenges to behavioral modification programs. We'd transformed our trauma into purpose. The world hadn't changed overnight. Similar programs still operated, hidden behind legitimate facades. But our voices had joined others demanding transparency, accountability, protection for vulnerable children. Mother's vision of optimized humans had failed because she'd never understood what made us human in the first place. As I spoke to that conference, I thought about 4, the number I'd once been. That child still existed within me, trained to be precise and logical. But now those skills served my own purposes, not Mother's. I'd kept what was useful and discarded what was harmful, choosing which parts of my conditioning to retain. The last time I saw Mother was during a parole hearing she'd requested after serving 8 years. She sat across from the board, still composed, still treating everything as an experiment. When asked if she felt remorse, she explained that remorse was an inefficient emotion that clouded logical thinking. The parole was denied. Our family gathered that evening at Allison's house. The younger ones, now teenagers and young adults, talked about their plans, college applications, job interviews, normal concerns for normal lives. We'd given them what Mother never could, the freedom to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to be human. Looking around that table, I saw not numbers, but individuals, each unique, each valuable beyond any calculation Mother could have made. We'd proven that humans couldn't be optimized like code because our worth wasn't in our function, but in our existence itself. The photo behind Mother's books showing her as a numbered child makes me wonder if she ever really had control at all. Was she just running someone else's program from 50 years ago without even realizing it? That simple truth had defeated her entire philosophy. The estate had been demolished, replaced with a community garden. Sometimes I visited, watching families tend their plots, children playing between the rows. Life had returned to that space, chaotic and unmeasured and beautiful. It was the perfect repudiation of everything Mother had tried to create. We'd won more than a legal victory. We'd reclaimed our humanity and helped others do the same. The numbers were gone, replaced by names and stories and futures Mother never could have calculated. In trying to erase us, she'd instead created voices that would never be silenced. Our survival was its own form of justice, our thriving the ultimate verdict against her vision. We were living proof that humans were more than components in an equation. We were complex, contradictory, and irreducibly ourselves, and that would always be enough. All right, time to close the book on this one, folks. Appreciate you putting up with my clever quips. And yes, even the terrible puns. You're a real one. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.